Hey everyone, you're watching KTAL News Now. I'm your host, Anthony Mocklin, and today is Wednesday, hump day, whatever you want to call it. We're in the middle of the week. We are almost to the weekend. So stick with us today as we talk about Wellness Wednesday, where we will be covering a bunch of health stories as well as listing some tips on how you can apply into your everyday life to live a healthier lifestyle. The topics include a brain-eating amoeba, tips on how to avoid mosquitoes in the summer heat, walking and how it can improve your everyday life and decrease your risk of dying from pretty much anything, and how this past Friday was World IVF Day, and we'll be talking more about that and the journey we've made since then, as well as the side effects of the weight loss drug Ozempic. We're going to be diving way more into all of those, so stick with us. Our first topic, unfortunately, involves a 12-year-old in South Carolina who lost his life to a brain-eating amoeba, and his name was Jason Carr. He was spending the 4th of July weekend with his family on Lake Murray in South Carolina, which is about 15 miles west of Columbia, and he was swimming, fishing, he was out there boating with his family, just having a great time. And then a few days later, he came home and he started having this headache. And then once he started taking pain medications and then those weren't working, it ended up getting worse. And he actually ended up developing nausea and started throwing up. And he unfortunately passed away about 2 weeks later. And the brain-eating amoeba that caused it is known as Naegleria fowleri, and it ended up entering his brain through the nose, and his parents have started to speak out because they want more reportings and warnings about people who go into bodies of water and experience that. They want to let people know so that they can avoid that and let other people know, like I said, so that, because they said they were pretty much like, I cannot imagine that happening to anyone else. I want other people to avoid that. And unfortunately, there's no state laws or regulations that require people to report things of this nature in South Carolina. I mean, that's the case with most states in the country. So it's unfortunate that happened, and they're calling for better reporting and transparency when it comes to testing the water to make sure it's safe, that no other people get affected by it. And the amoeba itself is usually present in warm water, and the infection it causes is almost always fatal, unfortunately. And that infection, it's pretty rare. It usually only affects around like 10 people per year, but the fatality rate is around like 95%, so most people do end up passing away, sadly. And a study that was conducted from 1962 all the way to 2004, they reported that there were 167 cases of people who experienced this infection from the amoeba, and unfortunately only 4 of those people survived, just to give you an idea of how dangerous it is and how serious this is. It's not something to play around with. The infection itself, it causes brain swelling, and it usually destroys the tissue up there. It causes that headache and that nausea that Jason was experiencing. And they are primarily found in warm bodies of water. Like I said, they can turn up in hot springs, rivers, and tap water, but that's usually a rare case, which is why doctors and scientists always recommend to use sterile water if you're trying to clear out your nasal cavity using like a neti pot, for example, because there's been documented cases of people who developed that brain-eating bacteria from a neti pot and later passed away from it. So it's a very serious matter. The amoeba itself usually enters when water is like forced up your nose. If you're jumping or diving into water, which I'm sure Jason was doing, he was doing what any normal 12-year-old kid would do, just having a great time. I mean, his parents recorded that he told them that it was like the best 4th of July ever. So just a really awful, awful, tragic scenario. Our condolences and our hearts go out to the Carr family. It's just a really awful scenario, like I said. And it just stresses the importance of knowing the water that you're swimming in. Essentially, it's usually not the best if you're just going into water you can't really see. If it's just really dirty, there could be so many different things in there. Especially if you're in a lake or you're going to the beach, you're usually pretty afraid of just like what's in the water. I know I am. I usually don't like to swim in any water that I can't see in or I can't see the bottom of, because like I said, you don't know what's in that water. And one thing, particularly at beaches, if you're going to the beach over the summer or you have been, one thing that is permeated throughout is the fear of being bitten by a shark or eaten by a shark, which if you look at the grand scheme of things and our biggest predator as humans, the predator itself is actually much smaller because throughout recorded history, mosquitoes have actually been the number one killer of humanity across our existence through the passage of several diseases like malaria and yellow fever, to name the top two. And mosquitoes themselves are responsible for around 1 million deaths per year for humans, and whereas sharks are only responsible for around 10 per year, so it's a very rare compared to mosquitoes, which throughout all of human history has been a pest, essentially, in terms of resulting in so much death of humans, cattle, like everything. And if you're outdoors this summer and you want to have a good time or you're having a barbecue, that's usually something that can be pretty annoying outside, just getting bitten by mosquitoes. So Dr. Timothy C. Weingard actually listed 5 tips to prevent yourself from getting bitten, or at least to reduce the risk of it. And the first one is to avoid alcohol, which is not a very popular one. Especially if you're hosting a barbecue or a gathering with your friends, you want to crack open some cold ones with your friends, just have a good time. But if you, like mosquitoes in particular, they don't have normal vision. They use thermal vision to detect heat signatures, and unfortunately alcohol does raise your body temperature, which makes you way easier to spot, and it makes you a bigger target for mosquitoes. So if you want to substitute the alcohol for some water or a lemonade, a cool glass of anything else, essentially, that is generally recommended. And other ways you can keep yourself cool leads into the second tip, which is to keep yourself cool and not avoid any exercise or heavy breathing, because mosquitoes can smell carbon dioxide from up to over 200 feet away in some cases. So if you are exercising or breathing heavily, that does make you a bigger target and way easier to spot than normal. And if you're wearing dark clothes, that usually does retain a lot more heat than lighter clothes. So the best practice is to wear lighter clothes or long sleeves in some cases. If you're wearing like a fishing shirt that's very light and breathable, but also long sleeve to protect your skin, that's usually recommended. To armor up, essentially, which another way that is probably the most common way to armor up is through bug spray. But it's not like perfume or other fragrances where you can just kind of spray yourself a little bit and then you're good to go. You don't want to miss any spots, because if you do, then that's kind of like a hole in the armor that mosquitoes can kind of poke through and get through and still bite you. And there are some clothing that actually comes with mosquito-specific insecticide, but I know that's not something that somebody or most people just have sitting in their closet, but it's still an option for people who want that extra layer of protection against mosquitoes. The fourth tip is actually to get rid of any still or standing water that is in your general area, because female mosquitoes lay eggs in that still water, and they don't need a whole lot. I mean, it can just, like, the most common areas are in these ponds or streams, but it can also be in old containers that are just laying around, or even a bottle cap full of just a tiny bit of water. That is another place that they can lay eggs, so be sure to get rid of that anywhere around your house or in your yard to avoid developing these breeding grounds for mosquitoes. It's just the best way to go about it. And the fifth way, which is also a not popular one, is to essentially smell bad. And this involves skipping a shower or two, because the worse you smell, the more bacteria that grows on your body. And mosquitoes hate this. It makes you so much less attractive to bite if you don't smell good, because they love like these deodorants, soaps, and other fragrances. They are obsessed with that. But if you are going to go that route and not shower, there's one exception, which is to wash your feet, because if you don't shower for a while and then your feet build up bacteria, the bacteria that specifically grows on your feet is actually the same one that is found to ripen some cheeses, and that bacteria serves as an aphrodisiac for mosquitoes. They go crazy over that. It's also why, if you've been bitten by mosquitoes a lot in the past, like, you'll notice that they love going for your ankles and your feet because of that bacteria that grows on there, like I said. So if you're going to go that route, it's best to be sure to wash all the bacteria off your feet and make sure they're clean above all else. And an honorable mention, that's not really a tip, but something to know, is that if you want to check your blood type, type O blood havers are more susceptible to mosquito bites than type A or type B. And this is not a myth. This is scientifically backed, because if you look at the misconceived notions of myths when it comes to mosquito bites, there's some that say that they prefer women over men, or that they like blondes and redheads more than people with dark hair. Those are all completely false. There's no evidence to back any of those myths. But one thing that is true is the blood type, because type O blood is their like premium choice, like high-end fancy restaurant to them, because type O blood, people who have type O blood are 2 times as likely to get bitten by mosquitoes than type A, whereas type B blood is usually somewhere in between that number. But if you're someone who has type O blood, you'll definitely want to layer up more and just protect yourself more, because statistically speaking, you are more susceptible to mosquito bites. And that's something you want to keep in mind this summer. If you're outdoors, the sun's out longer. If you're just going on a walk through your neighborhood, which is also something that can keep you healthy, because what if I told you that just 15 minutes of walking a day can reduce your risk of death from pretty much anything by 20%. And that is something that is backed by the American Journal of Preventive Medicine. They conducted a study where they found that 15 minutes of fast walking per day lowers your risk of dying from any physical or cardiovascular disease by 20%, which is huge considering that heart disease and cardiovascular disease is the biggest cause of death in the United States, period, of anything. So that's huge for that. People with heart disease saw the biggest improvement in their everyday life just by walking 15 minutes per day. And not just walking, but fast walking specifically, which the American Journal of Preventive Medicine defines as climbing stairs or brisk walking around your neighborhood or just normal exercise. Whereas slow walking is moving around your house or work or walking your dog at a leisurely pace. So that's something you want to avoid. I mean, it still helps, but it's not nearly as helpful as fast walking, because the duration of the walk doesn't necessarily matter. It's more about the speed of the walk. And if you've played sports, you've heard the term speed kills, which in football is a huge thing, because if you're a wide receiver on offense and you're faster than the cornerback that's guarding you, you usually beat them pretty easily for an wide open touchdown. So this is the same case here, although it doesn't directly kill anyone. By walking faster, it actually helps you, because they found that 3 or more hours of slow walking only resulted in a 4% lower risk of death by anything, whereas fast walking resulted in a 20% decrease in the risk of death from anything, which if you do the math, that's 5 times less likely to die from just natural physical or cardiovascular diseases. As I said, heart disease is the biggest cause of death in the United States, so they saw the most improvement and benefits from this. And the brisk walk not only helps with cardiovascular disease by it increases your heart rate and sends more oxygen to your muscles, and that helps you control your weight as well as your blood pressure, and helps reduce inflammation, leading to longer and healthier lives. All of these do that. And one thing that I found particularly interesting about this study is that it helps deal with the most susceptible and most vulnerable communities, because most studies when it comes to fitness help deal with middle-class white Americans, whereas this study focused predominantly on black low-income adults across 12 southeastern states, and these communities experience higher rates of chronic disease and premature death. The study was used with over 80,000 participants over the course of 2 decades. They were from the ages of 40 to 79, and about 2/3 of those participants were black low-income populations. And like I said, those populations and communities experience higher rates of heart disease and diabetes. And this is something that is particularly important because fast walking does not require any gym membership or special equipment or training. It's something that anyone can do anywhere, anytime. So it helps these low-income communities in particular, because if they don't have access to a state-of-the-art gym or they can't afford a gym membership, it's something that they can do on their own just anytime. It costs nothing to do, and the benefits are immense. It like I said, it's just 15 minutes of your day. That's all it takes to just live a healthier life so that you can live longer and eventually be present in not only your kids' lives, but your grandkids' lives in the future. And if you're a parent and you want to have kids, or you're looking to have kids, you'll probably know what IVF is, which stands for in vitro fertilization. And this past Friday was celebrated as World IVF Day, which celebrated the first ever IVF birth this day in 45 years ago. And since then, there have been millions of people that have been born using IVF. And it mainly helps people who struggle to have children. And NBC's Alicia Gatewood spoke with a local specialist to talk about the impact of IVF and the journey it's had since then.
July 25th, 1978, that was the birth of Louise Brown, the world's first IVF baby.
In vitro fertilization, or IVF, has become a lifeline for couples struggling to conceive. Dr. John Preston Perry, owner of Positive Steps Fertility, says although the science has advanced over the years, his mission is still the same, giving hope to those trying to get pregnant.
Around 2% of babies born in the U.S. are born through IVF.
The IVF process involves retrieving eggs, fertilizing them outside the body, and implanting the embryo into the uterus. Dr. Perry says some cases can be difficult, but as technology evolves, he says success rates increase.
The success rates just keep going up and up. I've met people who were the product of IVF in the 1980s, and it took 8 rounds of IVF for them to have a child.
He says it's important to have open and understanding conversations.
So I think the most important thing is people just need to find out where they are. Not everyone needs IVF.
Dr. Perry says on National IVF Day, we should celebrate families and remind those still waiting that hope is real.
Louise Brown is a wonderful woman. I've met her personally, talked with her, and she has been a beacon of hope for moms to be everywhere.
And one procedure that's been increasingly popular is cosmetic surgery, particularly after using the drug Ozempic. There's been a phenomenon known as Ozempic face that results from the vast amount of weight loss that comes from taking Ozempic and then it leaves your face kind of sagging or less filled, if that makes sense. And while there has been an explosion in weight loss, there was also these detrimental side effects to people's physical appearance that they're not satisfied with. And if you don't know what Ozempic is, it is a drug that was primarily prescribed to type 2 diabetes patients, but the active ingredient in it, semaglutide, is a type of GLP-1 medication. And semaglutide particularly stimulates the pancreas, which triggers insulin production, and this leads to a loss in appetite and a feeling that you're full, like you aren't really as hungry anymore. But this was primarily just prescribed to type 2 diabetes patients, and 1 in 8 adults in America have used or are using a GLP-1 drug now, and 2 in 5 of those are solely using it for weight loss, which it's become a huge phenomenon. It's been a surge in the use of Ozempic outside of diabetes patients for people who are looking to lose weight. And once you lose that weight, it leads to this loss of volume in your face in particular, and the rest of your body as well, but particularly your face, as that's the one you're showing the most if you're introducing yourself to people or just in everyday life. And people have reported to be looking like they felt like they looked older or like deflated. And one person said that they felt that their face was like melting, or it looked like it was melting. That person in particular lost like around like 50 pounds, I believe. So that's a lot of lost weight to kind of just like less, like fill your face less. And the reason for this is that adults, your body does not make fat cells anymore. So whenever you lose or gain weight, these cells aren't multiplying or decreasing. They're actually just becoming bigger or smaller, which whenever they become smaller, it usually just leads to that decreased volume, and it makes your face look less full. And if you're someone who is in your mid-40s or older, that's where it starts to become the most noticeable, because your skin is not as elastic anymore. It can't really like rebound from a huge weight loss like that. And if you're losing like 10 pounds, it won't be as like common to notice a less filling face or like a drooping face. But when you start losing like 20, 30 pounds or more, in like that woman's case 50 pounds, that's when it's almost like a guarantee that you're going to experience some form of like Ozempic face. And people have turned to cosmetic surgery to fix that in the form of facelifts and neck lifts. But it's kind of a scary thought, because it remains to be seen what the results of that will be if someone experiences an Ozempic rebound, which is normally when, because Ozempic is not something that you're supposed to take the rest of your life. Most people only ever take it for around a year, and they end up getting taken off of the Ozempic once they achieve their goal weight or they've lost enough weight to where they're satisfied. But unfortunately, a lot of these people, once they're off the medication, they end up regaining that weight that they lost, usually in around like 10 months being off the medication. So it remains to be seen what will happen to people who opted for cosmetic surgery or plastic surgery, that once they lost the weight but then they ended up gaining the weight back. I don't know what's going to happen to their appearance if that happened. It's just a very scary thought to see. Like I said, it remains to be seen what the results and after effects of that will be. So it's important because Ozempic is kind of a band-aid on the actual problem when it comes to not only nutrition but also being active and helping to keep your weight down if you wanted to lose a lot of weight and you're at your target weight. And once you get off Ozempic and then you just revert back to where it was, it's just a net negative in the long run. So it's important to stay physically active and to keep up at just doing things to maintain your weight. And if you want to lose more weight, just to keep being active. And one way you can do that is by walking 15 minutes a day, maybe, like we were talking about. But that's all from me today. Thank you so much for joining me. It's Wednesday, which, like I said, we're almost to the weekend. Tomorrow we'll be looking forward to the weekend and the events you can do around the area. And then Friday will be another episode of Feel Good Friday, where we'll take these feel good stories throughout the week to put a cherry on top of the week. And you can find all of our previous episodes on our website at ktalnews.com. And you can see our previous week's episodes on our YouTube page at KTAL News. You can see us at KTAL News Now every day, Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. I'm looking forward to the rest of the week. Be sure to stick with us. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'm Anthony Mocklin, and thank you for joining us.